It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Good to have you with us on this Friday. Well, hundreds of mail-in ballots from last fall's election in Vanderburgh County remain missing. Tom Langhorne of the Evansville Courier and Press updated the story this week. I asked him how many ballots we're talking about.
It is almost 550. The election office in Vanderburgh County got 6,428 requests for absentee ballots, applications, and of those, 5,886 were returned and 41 were subsequently tossed out because they arrived after the deadline. So that gave you an absentee ballot return rate of 91.5%, which sounds like a high number, but it's a few percentage points lower than past election years' return rates. And that's the scenario that the former county clerk thought was unlikely to begin with. And that was, I think part of her suspicion.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Marcia Abel Barnhart. She was the county clerk at the time. You spoke to her. What does she say about those missing ballots now?
Well, she believes that one day someone in some U.S. postal facility somewhere is going to stumble on them in a dusty old box and find hundreds of absentee ballots that were mailed and were never delivered. Or there's another possibility. She believes these ballots are lost forever in one of two ways, really. The mail-in absentee ballots could have been sent by Vanderburgh County and never received by voters, or received and completed by voters and never received by Vanderburgh County. And she did start calling people in the last weeks of her tenure as county clerk, and admittedly an unscientific sample. She called a few dozen people, and I think ended up talking to maybe half a dozen or more people who returned her calls. And she told me that they said to her, "I never did get it. Never did get an absentee ballot in the mail. Nobody told her I got it and voted it. They all said they didn't get it." But then in December, she had told me that she spoke to one voter who said he had sent it in, and another who said that she never got it. And so, I mean, her opinion is that the poor management by the Postal Service is to blame. And, this really goes back to October, before the campaign ended, when 300 or so absentee ballots for Vanderburgh County voters got marooned in the U.S. Postal Service's Louisville, Kentucky processing and distribution center. And those ballots were finally found and sent to Evansville's main post office for, processing and delivery. And, that really eroded the clerk's confidence in the Postal Service. Right. What you have to know is that the Postal Service for months, almost a year now, has been sending Evansville's outgoing letters and flats, like magazines, catalogs and such, to Louisville for processing. And that includes outgoing mail that's destined for addresses within Evansville, like the 300 or so pre-postage paid absentee ballots that were sent to Vanderburgh County residents by the Vanderburgh County Election Office in September. Yeah. So this is all part of a large-scale Postal Service national 10-year plan that they call Delivering for America, which according to them is an operational upgrade.
Right, right. Well, you mentioned the fact that so much of the mail from Evansville goes to Louisville for processing. I'm reminded of a little anecdote from here at WNIN. Across the parking lot from us is a financial institution that we deal with. And at one point, a check was going either from here to there or there to here. And, of course, you drop it in the mail and it goes all the way to Louisville and then comes all the way back. In the end, it seems like we may have been better just walking it across the parking lot, But
right.
So as you mentioned, the former county clerk, Marcia Abel Barnhart, she's lost confidence in the Postal Service. But what does the post office have to say about it? I believe they dealt with some winter weather that was a factor, right?
Yes. in January, there were reports that emerged from inside the Postal Service's Louisville facility that packages and mail, many of them long past due, were filling up bins as workers were working to clear a backlog created by staffing shortages and winter weather. And there was an anonymous employee of the facility showed the Louisville news outlet WDRB News photos and videos from inside the facility weeks after the snow and ice had, blanketed much of Louisville area, and it created, a large backlog of mail sitting in boxes. And there were reports that packages were being thrown into a barn that was serving as an extra storage area. And this anonymous Postal Service employee told WDRB it was like this before the weather even came. Postal Service is packed with mail, and it's total chaos. And so the Postal Service responded to that report, blaming back-to-back severe weather events. And they said, these events, coupled with an increase in employee availability issues following the storms, contributed to what they called temporary mail and package delivery delays in the region. So, the county clerk, Marcia Abel Barnhart, had not been aware of that when I spoke to her this week, but, she said it wasn't surprising to her, having lost confidence in the Postal Service. So, the incident in October really is what I think, is a big factor in her thinking.
Right.
The incident where those 300 ballots were marooned.
Right. This is the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. We're speaking with Tom Langhorne of the Evansville Courier and Press. You can see his stories at courierpress.com. Well, Tom, we mentioned the former county clerk, Marcia Abel Barnhart. What does the new county clerk, Dottie Thomas, have to say about this situation?
Dottie Thomas was elected in November without opposition to succeed Barnhart. And Dottie tells me there's been no word about the missing ballots from the Postal Service. And as far as Dottie is concerned, they still haven't shown up, of course. And Dottie told me, I think they're gone for good. I don't know where, but they're gone for good.
Yeah.
So Clark has written them off. And maybe they will be found one day. Who knows? Who knows what happened?
Right. Now, obviously, we're hearing some disappointment that, nearly 550 people who took the time to try to vote didn't get their votes counted, right?
We don't know in each case what happened, but or where the breakdown occurred, but there were 550 some absentee ballots that never came back.
Yeah. Now, as we know, a lot of people vote by mail. Any concern about an incident like this having a chilling effect on mail-in voting?
I don't know about that, but there were two voters who told Marcia Abel Barnhart that they had decided to vote in person after reading our story in October about the 300 absentee ballots that had gotten marooned in Louisville. So it's possible that people will have less confidence. I don't know.
Yes, indeed. Well, Tom, anything else to add that we haven't touched on here?
As I've reported, there are no local elections this year, which is, that happens every few years.
Right.
It's not a usual thing, but we do have midterm elections next year.
That is Tom Langhorne of the Evansville Courier and Press. As always, Tom, we appreciate you chatting with us, and we hope to chat with you again soon.
Thank you, John.
Coming up on the Friday Wrap, WNIN's Tim Jagalow will join us. We'll listen back to his feature on planting season arriving for many area farmers. That's straight ahead on the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM.
This week on Latino USA, the Trump administration is imprisoning Venezuelan men with no criminal record in El Salvador. we hear from a mother trying to get justice for her son. That's this week on Latino USA.
Latino USA airs at 1 p.m., make that 2 p.m. Saturday on WNIN FM.
From student to school president, the story of the new president at the University of Southern Indiana, Steve Bridges. I'm David James, and on 2 Main Street, we find out what Bridges has learned working for the 4 previous presidents and his plans for the future at USI. 2 Main Street airs Thursday at noon, Saturday at 11. Presented by Jeffrey Berger Kimrin and the Berger Wealth Team at Bayard Private Wealth Management.
On the next Radio Lab, the story of a piece of plastic we don't think about very often.
The cassette changed everything.
The cassette tape.
Cassette tapes were absolutely central in the Iranian Revolution.
The impact on China was just utterly profound.
I mean, you can draw a clear line from the cassette to the internet.
No.
Absolutely.
Join us for the second episode in our 4-part series, Mixtape.
Radio Lab airs at 3 p.m. Sunday. It repeats at noon Monday on WNIN FM. It's the Friday wrap on WNIN. John Gibson with you. Good to have you along on this Friday. Well, planting season has arrived for many area farmers. Crops like corn and soybeans are going into the ground this week following some tumultuous spring weather, while looking ahead to a tumultuous global economy. WNIN's Tim Jagalow put together this report.
That's the sound of a corn planter rolling along the field. It's actually doing several actions at once to properly plant the seed.
Got to create an opening for the seed to go into, so you have row openers, more or less.
That's Hans Schmitz, one of the farmers in family-owned and operated Dutchman farms in Posey County. This machine, piloted by his Uncle Al, opens a row for the seed.
Then you've got the actual seed dropping into the furrow itself. So you've got 4 to 5 different instruments there, all in line, getting the row opened, getting the seed in, closing the row, and hopefully then we're putting it at the correct depth uniformly.
This was the best week to start because, among other things, the ground is now firm enough after such a wet spring for equipment to travel the fields without getting stuck. His corporation farms about 1,300 acres. It's not a massive farm, but their customers can be anywhere in the world, thanks to the nearby ports of Indiana, Mount Vernon. Being a globally connected smaller farm has its trade-offs. On the business side, they have to watch several things at once.
So any global events affecting agricultural production will affect local pricing, and we always have to keep an eye on any potential black swan event to occur. So one of the more recent black swan events that really affected pricing locally was when Russia invaded Ukraine. So any potential resolution?
Both countries pulled their grain production from the global market, increasing demand internationally. And tariffs are a mixed bag.
If you look at 145% tariffs on China, and China preparing to look elsewhere for soybeans, that has had a pretty direct impact on soybean prices right now.
Well, does that mean that the tariffs are helping your profits then?
Not necessarily. It can go either way. However, generally speaking, U.S. farmers are the best in the world at what they do. The yields that we have in the Midwest on corn and soybean will meet or outmatch any other producer in the world, which means that the U.S. for corn and soybeans has a comparative advantage, economically speaking. And wherein that's the case, any tariff or restriction to free trade has a negative effect on the world's best producers of an item.
As the corn planter advances down the field, Schmitz kneels down to the soil. He prods the ground with a pocket knife, checking the depth of the seeds.
And then for checking seed depth, you're just taking a knife or an instrument that'll dig a little bit and going down into that row and trying to find a corn kernel, which here on the end rows is a little bit more difficult than in the middle of the field.
He finds the bright pink corn seed among the brown soil.
It's got that hot pink seed treatment on it, usually fungicide and insecticide both, that's going to protect it while it emerges and usually a little bit after it emerges.
He says they plant 30 to 40,000 corn seeds per acre and about 130,000 seeds for soy per acre. In another field, soybeans are being planted, in this case by Scott Dugan. Again, Schmitz uses his knife to check for soil depth. He'll also have to watch the world economy and weather conditions ahead to make sure that the business stays safe. For WNIN News, I'm Tim Jagalow.
And Tim joins us live here on the Friday Wrap. As always, Tim, thanks for the time.
No problem, John.
Good to have you here. Well, aside from world events, and Lord knows we've seen lots of economic world events lately, what else do farmers need to watch for?
Well, as a farm manager, he said he has to keep a sharp eye out on economics. So that includes looking at a lot of programs, I guess we'll say assistance programs for producers, such as the USDA program. Well, there's a couple USDA programs, actually. One of them is the Emerging Commodity Assistance Program, or Emergency Commodity Assistance Program.
Right.
Well, that's a $10 billion fund overall to help producers kind of balance the challenge between what it costs to make or produce a crop versus what they're going to be paid for it, to kind of help them make up those gaps there. And so he's watching for whether there's going to be another disbursement of that. There's also the Climate Smart Commodity Program that he mentioned. That's a small program, but it kind of helps farmers to pivot into other climate-friendly revenue streams. You know, and regarding those world events, reporters like to know whether something's good or bad for somebody. And he kind of was cautious to say whether something like, say, the war in Ukraine would be good or bad for U.S. producers or producers overall. He said it's kind of neutral because it creates a tug of war between volatility, which is price volatility is bad, but decreased supply is supposedly good for producers. So he kind of creates a wash, so to speak, in these situations.
Yeah. Well, of course, farmers also have to watch the weather. We've seen a wet spring. In fact, just today on this Friday, we've seen quite a bit of rain. How does a wet spring affect the crops potentially?
Well, it affects everything. It affects their timeline. I mean, the good news is that it kind of brought them out of a drought, but they could have another drought later, you know. But it creates a lot of problems, though, really, because for one thing, they can't start as soon because there was too much water. They wanted to start in early April, and they weren't able to do that because, obviously, if it's wet, they can't get their equipment out there. You know, the first thing they like to do is to run their sprayers, and their sprayers do what's called burning the cover crop. So they spray Roundup on the cover crop so they can get that out of the way. And the cover crop, of course, is for erosion, to protect from erosion. And so it makes it difficult to get started. You know, they only started planting on Wednesday, and then they had maybe most of a day on Thursday, and then you can look outside and see what's happening today. And so they won't be able to get back to it until Monday or Tuesday. And so basically, though, they've been preparing for the opening to plant, you know, as soon as they could. You know, they were ready since early February, and they were kind of watching the length of this wet spring and deciding, okay, when are we going to be able to jump on this thing? And that's kind of like what they had to do. So on the technical side for the seeds, overly wet soil is bad for the seeds, possibly because it could cause this thing called sidewall compaction, which means that, you know, you heard in the story about how the machine creates a furrow, plops the seed in there and covers it back up.
Right.
If it's too wet, the furrow, the walls of the furrow are going to be too hard, making it difficult for the seed to sprout proper roots into the ground and then grow up. So there's no way to fix that either.
Right. Yeah, that's a complicated process. Now, as you mentioned, spring planting started this week. It will continue. So what's the timeline for the harvest around here?
When I asked him about timelines, he said it never stops. I mean, he said because, you know, they paid for their seeds late last year. They took delivery of them in February. They're also a dealer of seeds, so they've been selling and delivering their seeds all spring. They had their planter machine ready in February to plant, and they were hoping to take advantage of, you know, early April weather, but they couldn't. And as far as what they plant, they try to plant an early soybean crop, and then they have their soybean plus corn crop, and then hopefully toward the end of the season they'll plant a late season soybean.
Right.
So they kind of have like a staggered harvest going on as well. But basically, mid-September to the end of October is when they'll be harvesting.
Right. And of course, there's also winter wheat. That's another crop that gets into the rotation, as I understand it. Yeah. Now, the farm you visited here is Posey County. What can you tell us about other farming that's happening in the area?
Yeah, he said his direct neighbors, which as we were driving around, he's like pointing at them and waving and telling me who their names are.
Sure.
But, his direct neighbors farm a lot of the same things. Some of them don't do winter wheat. Some of them do. He said he's amongst the 30th percentile with size, so they're not a big farm. Some neighbors farm a lot more than they do. But statewide, there was a census done in 2022 by the USDA, which talked about what is done in Posey County. So it's also corn and soybeans, but also pork, poultry, eggs. That's 90% of what the farmers do. Indiana is the 9th largest farming state, and I guess it's an overall thing. But according to the report, in 2022, there were 462 farms in Posey County. Farming
just in Posey County.
Yeah. What did I say? What number did I say?
462.
That is the number. Yes.
Uh-huh.
So farming 256,000 acres, and the market value is about $222+ million. They also grow vegetables, melons, sweet potatoes, fruits, tree nuts, berries, hay, a little bit of demographics. Out of the 800+ farmers, 640 producers are male, 172 are female, and it's mostly white with a few Latinos.
I see. Yes, a very agricultural state, or county, I should say, Posey County. When you go there late in the summer, you'll see corn that's taller than you and I, and beans fields full of beans and what have you. So yeah, it's a big process, a major agricultural county. Anything else to add, Tim, that we haven't touched on here?
Well, I'm always just struck by how complex the business is. In some ways, it seems simple. You have your machine out there, you run it through the field, it drops the seed in. But there's so much weather and economics and administration that goes into it, and some farmers are now into like they're using drones over their fields to track things, and when they're piloting these planters, they're watching several live monitors that give them numbers on what the parts of the machine are doing. It's just a very, very complex business, and so I kind of only get onto the little surface knowledge of it, whereas it's very, very complicated.
Yes, indeed, and a very, very important industry, obviously. That's WNIN's Tim Jagalow. As always, Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem, John.
Always good to have you along. Well, coming up on the Friday Wrap, we'll hear from WNIN's Kenton McDonald as he speaks with Indiana Public Broadcasting's Bente Bouthier regarding sober living homes. That's coming up on WNIN FM.
The restaurant business has felt particularly volatile in the past several years, but Brian Buxton of Fingers, Fork, Knife, and Spoon sees a lot of promise in our local food scene, with more restaurants opening than closing and people continuing to take the leap and start their own food business. I'm Peggy Pirro. Hear my conversation with Brian on the state of local dining and his new role as owner and publisher of the Evansville Free Monthly News for You, all on the latest episode of the Food From Here podcast at WNIN.org.
In 1950, bandleader Duke Ellington started his own record label that recorded numerous small group dates, often led by Ellington cohort Billy Strayhorn, featuring musicians such as saxophonist Johnny Hodges, singer Al Hibbler, and bassist Oscar Pettiford. I'm David Brent Johnson, inviting you to join me for a dive into an obscure treasure trove of Ellingtonia with DIY by Ellington, Duke Ellington's Mercer record label, this week on Nightlights.
Hope you can stay up for Night Lights. It comes your way at 10 p.m. Saturday on WNIN FM.
If you really want to know what's going on in this country, Hi, my name is Isaac. I'm calling from Columbus, Ohio.
You have to get away from the extremes and listen to the middle.
This is Samantha calling from St. Louis, Missouri.
On The Middle with Jeremy Hobson, I take your calls live on some of the biggest issues we face.
While I have hope for change, there are so many issues that I feel like are not being discussed on either side.
Join me each week on The Middle.
8 p.m. Thursday on WNIN FM. It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Good to have you along on this Friday. Well, sober living homes are meant to help people who are recovering from addiction. One such business in Bloomington opened its first house a year ago and has already started 5 more. A former resident reached out to say that they had a negative experience while living at Malibu House. It's a for-profit status, and the business owner, going by 2 names, has a long record of arrests, suggested that there was more to learn. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Binte Bouthier has more, and WNIN's Kenton McDonald spoke to her following. It's the Friday Wrap on We'll have that story for you here in just a moment.
Last spring, Max Meckes opened his first sober living house in Bloomington, less than 3 years after his last drug-related arrest. You won't find the name Max Meckes on many of his arrest or court records, though. His legal name is Kyle Shepard. Meckes says Max is a longtime nickname. He goes by a different last name now because of a falling out with his Last spring, Max Meckes opened his first sober living house in Bloomington, less than 3 years after his last drug-related arrest. You won't find the name Max Meckes on many of his arrest or court records, though. His legal name is Kyle Shepard. Meckes says Max is a longtime nickname. He goes by a different last name now because of a falling out with his dad's family.
I do have a past. I've been in active addiction for a long time. My past is what uniquely qualifies me to be so relevant in this field. I will tell you that since we started Malibu House, you won't find anything new.
Meckes' past still follows him. He's on probation until 2029 because of separate felony convictions. He has a pending case in Warwick County where police say he stole 51 bottles of alcohol and a tote from Walmart worth almost $1,700 in 2023. Offenses further back include an arrest for child neglect in 2015. Police records say he left 9 and 11-year-olds in a car alone at a Luke Bryan concert. And he was arrested in Alabama and Pennsylvania for selling stolen wristbands outside a concert.
I'm an easy target. You know, my past is horrendous, right? I've been arrested all these times. I've done all kinds of stupid things. You know, I'm easy to come at. But I'm doing what I can right now to try to help other people and take myself out of the equation.
But Meckes and his co-founder, Amanda Cecil Campbell, are in the equation. Malibu House calls itself a charity organization on Facebook. On several occasions, it has solicited donations of cash and merchandise on social media. Taxpayer money and financial support from Salvation Army have gone to supporting rent and bed fees for Malibu residents. But unlike addiction service providers in Bloomington such as Amethyst House and Courage to Change, Malibu House is a business, not a nonprofit. It's registered with the state as a domestic limited liability partnership. Its recently redesigned website does not disclose its business status.
If anybody's ever comes up and asks us about that, I'm very clear about that we are a for-profit company.
But Kristen Castro, Executive Ministries Director at Healing Hands, says she only learned last month that Malibu House was for profit. Vinyl Lee, the head of Bloomington Salvation Army, also says he first learned of Malibu's for-profit status last month. Anthony Grimes, Vice President of the National Alliance for Recovery Residences, says groups such as Healing Hands and the Salvation Army should have understood much sooner about Malibu House's for-profit status.
I think it's something that should have been caught on the front end, so to speak, because we had talked a little earlier about truth in advertising and marketing materials and these different things in the standards that become expectations that these organizations are measured by.
Malibu House opened 4 more houses over the last year. It rents them from Pendragon Properties. Based on property listings, it costs Malibu about $1,500 to $2,500 each for monthly rent. From that and a one-time bed fee, it can turn a profit. Mekis says his company's rapid growth is because he's addressing a community need. Eric Wolf used to live in the Malibu house homes.
So I went to Malibu, and they had one house at that time.
You moved in there a second time to a different house in December.
Yeah, it was house, I think they call it House 3 on Chris Lane. That's the one that had 12 or 15 or 16 people in it at different times.
He says overcrowding was a problem, with as many as 6 people in one bedroom and a bathroom that didn't work.
Just too many people in one place. And you're dealing with people who have mental problems and addiction problems, and you just shove them in a house with as many as it'll take.
The National Alliance for Recovery Residences says there should be at least 50 square feet per person in a bedroom. Mekis didn't respond to follow-up questions on overcrowding. He points to numerous successes involving recovering people with substance use issues. Grimes says certification and accountability are key to a successful sober living environment. Mekis does not have any formal training in addiction recovery, and Malibu House is not state certified. In Indiana, a facility doesn't need state certification unless it wants to be eligible for state support.
One of the things that we're able to do through professionalizing our space is to really hold operators accountable to meeting the standards.
Wolf says Malibu House residents did uncompensated manual labor for the company, such as moving items into houses. Although Malibu House is for profit, Mekis says donations from nonprofits and manual labor from his residents are just part of the community.
This is how society should be, right? If we all help each other, if we're out there for the right reasons, this world could be such a better place.
Mekis says Malibu plans to expand again with another house this year. For WFIU News, I'm Ben Taboutier.
And we're back here on the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm Kenton McDonald. Happy to be joined by the reporter of the story you just heard, Ben Taboutier from Indiana Public Broadcasting Station, WFIU in Bloomington. Thanks for the time today.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thanks a lot. All right, so great work on this feature. It's actually a 2-part feature. We heard the first part, but I want to talk to you a little bit more in detail here about the work that you did on this. I'm curious, how did residents come to find out about Malibu House? Did you get any impression from them on that?
I didn't get a ton of impression on that. Well, I mean to say that they came to find out about Malibu House in a few different ways. Some of them said they encountered people, whether it be one of the owners of Malibu House through a support group or other ways out in the community while they were looking for housing. Some of them were referred or, as they were getting out of prison, were required to move into a sober living facility, and Malibu is what was available to them.
I see. Okay. I was checking their website prior to our conversation here, and it's up and active. They have quite a large footprint, it looks like, now across the Bloomington area, several houses, don't they?
Yeah, I think they've got 7 now.
Yeah. How did the owner of this operation decide to get into the recovery housing business? Because it is a for-profit. He has a for-profit company, correct?
Yeah, it is a for-profit company, and he said while he was in recovery himself, he noticed a need for this kind of service because he saw a lack of it himself when he was looking, and decided it would be something that he could provide.
I'm curious on the regulation side of this. You touched on this a little bit in your feature there, but are there measures in place to ensure that a recovery house is actually qualified to help people recover?
So that, well, if you are not receiving aid from the state, then you don't have to become licensed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so because they're for-profit, they're not taking money from the state, and that means that they are not really beholden to regulations with, I think it's the Department of Health or otherwise.
Did he make that known that they were for profit, or was that something he kind of kept on the back burner so he would get donations and contributions from agencies and groups that thought he was a nonprofit?
A few places that had worked with, a few places that had worked with Malibu House for several months prior to 2025 said that they only found out in February that he was for profit and had been operating under the assumption that he was nonprofit. And then another place, the Habitat for Humanity Restore, communicated with me in the last month, that they were specifically approached by Malibu House and asked if they could receive a discount for a nonprofit organization.
Okay. What about the city of Bloomington itself? Do they have any sort of jurisdiction or thoughts on the recovery houses themselves in different areas?
This is something I got busy with today, actually. I had a conversation with the Bloomington mayor, who actually was the head of the Habitat for Humanity in Monroe County for quite some years, so she's really knowledgeable in housing issues. But I was planning to ask her, and I did, about action the city can take with issues related to sober housing and rental issues, like the ones we reported on. And she told me that it's really complicated because people who are in recovery housing are a protected category. And so you can't enforce family definitions of 3 to 5 unrelated adults onto these houses.
I see.
And they wouldn't necessarily want to try doing that because you need to have sober living housing available in a community. She said what they could do was enforce rental regulations on them. And so they're actually pursuing Malibu House, essentially subleases from a rental group, Pendragon Properties in Bloomington. And so what they did do is for rental properties owned by Pendragon that were up for permit review, they went into those, and for the ones that they found issues with code violations, they've now told Pendragon that they won't be able to renew those permits.
Oh, okay. So they have to find a new place, perhaps, to put the recovery house?
Just a couple of those houses will, 2 of the 7 that were on for a permit renewal.
Okay.
And then I think eventually the rest of them will, because the city is not going to renew any of Pendragon's permits, which are, I think, a 3 to 5 year life cycle.
Okay. Finally wrapping up here, I know you spoke with a lot of former residents in these features that you did. Did you have any positive recovery stories from people who were in Malibu House? Good experiences?
No one reached out to me with any, and I had my number and contact listed on my coverage. I did see a couple that are on Google Review, but those aren't people that reached out to me specifically.
Okay. All right. Benta, thanks again for your time and great reporting on this matter.
Well, thank you so much for asking me about it.
You're welcome. That's Indiana Public Broadcasting's Benta Boutier from WFIU in Bloomington. And we'll be back after this on the Friday Wrap.
It's easy to suffer from information overload these days. Social media posts that just keep scrolling, bite-sized headlines sent to your phone and even your watch. I'm Ira Flato. Every week on Science Friday, we take a step back for a longer look into the big ideas in science. Take a deeper dive with us.
It's all on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
Friday afternoons from 1 to 3.
It looks almost exactly like the place you know. Those are almost the right curtains, almost the right pictures on the wall, and those people sitting around the table, well, they look almost exactly like your family. On the next Snap Judgment, hello from the other side. Snap Judgment, do not miss it.
You can catch Snap Judgment at 5 p.m. Sunday on WNIN FM.
I'm Christopher Kimball from Milk Street Radio. There's a hot new trend in beer, and let's just say double IPAs have been replaced by something much lighter.
It is literally a pint of beer foam.
A long and curious history of beer this week on Milk Street Radio from PRX.
You can catch Milk Street Radio at 1 p.m. Saturday on WNIN FM.
This week on Afterglow, we look at the songs of Mel Torme, including Born to Be Blue and A Stranger in Town, as performed by the songwriter himself, who was known as one of jazz's most notable singer-songwriters. I'm Richard Rowland, and join me for Mel Torme, the singer-songwriter, this week on Afterglow.
Afterglow comes your way at 11 p.m. Saturday on WNIN FM. It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Good to have you along on this Friday. Well, I'll be chatting with Jevin Redmond in just a moment for the sports chat, but before we hear that interview that we recorded yesterday, since then, of course, some big local sports news has happened, and that is the Evansville Thunderbolts. They won their first ever President's Cup last night. The Bolts topped Knoxville 2-1 in overtime to win the Southern Professional Hockey League Championship. Evansville won the best-of-3 series 2-0. There'll be a team rally for the Thunderbolts Tuesday evening at 6 outside the Ford Center. It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson, and joining me for the sports chat is Jevin Redmond. Jevin, good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Well, thanks for coming in. Well, let's talk about a variety of topics here. I understand there's a lot of high school basketball news, right?
Yeah, it seems like every year there's always a couple of changes as far as coaching positions, but this spring there's been quite a bit, and my list is fairly long. We'll try to make it as short as possible here. But in town, we'll start at Mater Dei High School. They have a new girls basketball head coach, and it's a familiar name, Terry Munsterman. He's been around the program for around 30 years in different roles as an assistant coach, and he had a daughter that played there about a decade ago. They won a couple of championships, and Mara Munsterman. But Terry Munsterman takes over as the new Mater Dei girls basketball head coach. And then also in town at Castle High School, Josh Kane is a new girls basketball head coach. He takes over for Bobby Meyer, who was there for 8 years. But Josh Kane, again, a familiar name at Castle. He's been assistant coach in the boys' side for 17 years. He's also the boys' golf head coach. So there's a couple of changes with girls' basketball. As we look at the boys' side, a name in town is moving out of town now. Bo Burkhart, who is an assistant coach at Bosse High School, is the new head coach at Washington High School. Bo was an assistant under his dad, Shane Burkhart, for a few years. And so Bo has big shoes to fill, replacing Gene Miller, who was the head coach at Washington for 20 years.
Yes, indeed.
And then we also had two coaches in the area step down. They haven't found the replacement yet for them, but Heritage Hills boys basketball head coach Nate Hawkins is stepping down for 9 years. He won a couple of sectional titles there. And then this is the most recent change, but at North Posey High School, their head coach Rusty Seymour is stepping down after 5 years. Rusty was a 2000 North Posey grad. He went 71-44 over 5 years. So a lot of moving parts with high school basketball coaching.
Yes, indeed. All right, well, let's move on to college baseball. The reason why we're talking a day before, we're actually recording this the day before, because there's a lot of college baseball that you're going to be involved in this weekend, right?
There is, yeah. Just about a month left in the college baseball season. Of course, they start mid-February, so their spring schedule goes very quickly. But we'll start with Evansville baseball. I'm on the road with them this weekend doing the radio broadcast for the Purple Aces, but they have 4 Missouri Valley Conference series left. They're at Missouri State this weekend. Right now, Missouri State is in first place in the conference standings. They play tonight at 6:30, Saturday at 2 o'clock, and then 1 o'clock on Sunday. Right now, the Purple Aces are a game under 500 in conference action. They're tied for 6th. They're a game back of 5th place and 3 games back of 4th place. But, John, they had a thrilling weekend last weekend against Indiana State. Yeah. They had back-to-back walk-off wins on Friday and Saturday, a walk-off home run on Friday, and then a walk-off single and extra innings on Saturday to take 2 or 3 against the Sycamores, so trying to ride that momentum on the road now. Yes, and then with USI baseball, they're in a similar position that Evansville is. They're 8-7 in their conference right now in 5th place, but they're only 2 games back of first place, so they can maybe make some ground here this weekend. They're at home on campus taking on Eastern Illinois tonight at 4 o'clock, and then Saturday at 3 o'clock, 1 o'clock on Sunday, as USI also has 4 Ohio Valley Conference series left.
All right. Well, while we're talking baseball, we're about a month into the Major League Baseball season now. What's going on? Anything surprising you?
Yeah, we'll start with kind of the popular teams of interest in the area, the Cardinals and the Cubs. They're on different paths right now. The Chicago Cubs appear to be a contender. They're 16-10 right now through the first month. Just had back-to-back wins against the Dodgers this week at home. They start a 3-game series with the Phillies this weekend. The Cardinals off to a slow start, especially on the road. They're 8-4 at home, but 2-11 away from Busch Stadium. So the Cardinals 10-15 overall. The good news for Cardinal fans is they're home this weekend against the Brewers for 3. Then also you have the Reds, who are 12-13, and the White Sox well below 500. But again, expectations weren't real high for the White Sox this year. They are at the A's this weekend.
Yes, indeed. And we mentioned high school basketball earlier, but obviously pro basketball is in full swing, the playoffs. How are the Pacers doing?
Yeah, so right now in the first round series, which is a best-of-7 series, so the first team to win 4 games. A good start for the Pacers so far. They protected home court as they won the first 2 games up in Indy. They blew out the Bucks in Game 1 last Saturday, 117-98. And then this past Tuesday, they had a narrow victory, 123-115. Now that series shifts to Milwaukee for Game 3 tonight at 7 o'clock. And then Game 4 will be in Milwaukee on Sunday at 8:30. If the Bucks win one of those games, they would have a Game 5 back in Indy on Tuesday.
The Pacers are off and running. We'll see how far they go in the NBA playoffs. Jevin Redmond, as always, thank you so much for the sports chat.
Yeah, thanks, John.
It's the Friday wrap on WNIN FM. Coming up, it's the Weekend Notebook. Hope you can stay with us.
This week in This American Life, Mari's fiance, Mikael, has a lot of tattoos.
Y yo, bueno.
Mari likes to make fun of him,
Tiene un Mickey Mouse, pero fumando.
like the one he has of Mickey Mouse, smoking a blunt. And then somebody sends her a video, and she recognizes Mikael by one of his tattoos. And he's in a prison in El Salvador. That's this week.
This American Life airs at noon Saturday. It repeats at 11 a.m. Sunday on WNIN FM.
Hey, it's Luke Burbank. This week on Livewire, writer, activist, and reformed hipster grifter Carrie Farrell on her infamous moniker.
I remember there being articles having to explain what a grifter was. And me, being an actual hipster, I was like, oh, God, the hipster part of it. Like, oh, that was like the worst part of it to me.
That's this week on Livewire from PRX.
The program airs at 6 p.m. Saturday and 1 p.m. Sunday on your public radio station, WNIN.
Way Down Yonder in New Orleans. It's one of many songs written about our home place. We'll hear some of those and go beyond. To blues and jazz, roots rock and soul, gospel and country, Tejano, Zydeco, and swamp pop. The beat goes on. American Roots from PRX.
You can catch the program at 8 p.m. Saturday or 10 p.m. Sunday on WNIN FM. It is the Friday wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson, and time now for the Weekend Notebook. A busy weekend in the Tri-State, starting with Tri-Fest in Henderson. The annual street festival is underway along Henderson's Main Street. It features food booths, carnival rides, live music, a fireworks display, and a pickleball tournament. Tri-Fest continues through Sunday afternoon in Henderson. It's Friday night in the Forum at USI. The free film series concludes tonight with a screening of the 2022 movie Hundreds of Beavers. The film is described as a silent supernatural epic. The show starts at 7 p.m. in Forum 1 at USI. An optional discussion follows the screening. Moving on to tomorrow, Saturday, it's Wilderness Weekend at Wesselman Woods. Admission to the Old Growth Forest is free Saturday and Sunday. Saturday's hours are 9 to 5. Sunday's hours are noon to 5 at Wesselman Woods. Also happening on Saturday, it's Yart at Angel Mounds. the spring installment of the local fine arts sale, where you'll find a variety of art pieces priced at $60 or less. The art runs from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Angel Mound's historic site off Pollock Avenue. Another event at Angel Mound's, it's Junior Archaeologist Day. Families are invited to dig into the world of archaeology. You can learn about the important tools used by archaeologists and meet with experts from the University of Evansville, University of Southern Indiana, and New Harmony State Historic Site. It's from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Angel Mounds Historic Site. Also happening on Saturday, it's the Peters Margident Spring Open House at UE. It's an opportunity to learn what's new at the historic tiny house on the University of Evansville campus. You can also learn more about architect Wes Peters' life and career with Frank Lloyd Wright. That open house is from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturday. Also happening this weekend, it's the Monster Jam at Ford Center. The Giant Truck Show is at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. on Saturday and at 1 p.m. on Sunday. Tickets start at $35. Also happening Saturday evening, it's the iCamp Quartet performing at First Pres. The Music and Sweets Treat event is at 3 p.m. Saturday at First Presbyterian at 2nd and Mulberry Streets. Tickets are $20. Also happening Saturday evening, it's Yellow Brick Joel and Old National Events Plaza. It's a musical tribute to Elton John and Billy Joel. It starts at 8 p.m. Tickets for Yellow Brick Joel at Old National Events Plaza are $29 to $59. And then moving on to Sunday, it's the Boca Big Band. The monthly big band concert starts at 2:30 p.m. at Boca Lounge in the Haney's Corner Arts District. Admission is free for the Boca Big Band Sunday afternoon at Boca Lounge. Well, that's going to wrap up our Friday wrap for this Friday. I'd like to thank all of our guests, including Tom Langhorn of the Evansville Courier and Press. Thanks to WNIN's Tim Jagalow, also our own Kenton McDonald. A big thanks to Indiana Public Broadcasting's Bente Bouthier. Also thanks to Jevin Redmond for the sports chat. Thanks also to Mariah Winnie for social media support here at WNIN. Also a big thanks to Jason Yeager for some engineering assistance today. Our thanks to Indiana Public Broadcasting stations and, of course, listeners like you. If you have an event that you'd like us to mention on the Weekend Notebook, send it to me, Jay Gibson, that's the letter J, G-I-B-S-O-N, at WNIN.org, and we'll try to get your event on the Friday wrap. And for this Friday, here at WNIN FM, that's a wrap.